nobody wants to talk about the reason that housing is so expensive. It's really simple. It's just not that complicated to figure out. Housing's expensive, costs more because more people want to live here than we have housing units for, okay? Real simple. And it's been that way for hundreds, if not thousands of years, that if you have more people want to be somewhere than they have housing for, it will cost more. Very simple. That's a reason why people down at the beach will pay a lot more because more people want to be there than somebody who wants to be much farther away from the beach or farther away for development. Yeah, a longer drive into work, those kind of issues that you have. But it's very simple. The problem that we've had in the last 4 years with the Biden administration, and not even to be political about it, but just as a real thing that happened, we are short the amount of housing units we need in the country. And then we allowed 8 million people over a 4-year period come in to the United States, legal or illegal, however you want to define the terms, with no housing for them. And to somehow think you could just add 8 million people, which comes out to like 2.5 people per housing unit on average, 3.8 million new housing units you need over a 4-year period. I mean, that's a lot of housing units. You just can't do it. And so the whole situation, you're not going to build your way out of it. There's simply not enough money to go ahead and build it. I mean, when we're seeing infill apartment projects at $700,000-800,000 for a 1-bedroom unit, I mean, that's billions upon billions of dollars to build a bunch of housing units for people that weren't even supposed to be here. But for whatever reason, previous administration just said, oh, you're all asylum seekers, come on in, everything's fine, and not worry about how we're going to solve it. So the reason the housing cost is high is we have more people here than we have housing units for, and until that number goes down, you're not going to make up the difference.
What about investments from other countries and people buying a lot of housing from China and other countries in Southern California or in California in general?
Yeah, so you're kind of getting to the question of when people that may or may not live here full-time, whatever, have a house as a second house or they're somewhere else. Are you talking about? That kind of gets into the whole issue with housing with the Airbnbs. I mean, you had houses built that people were living in that are now kind of structured as hotels or rooms for rent. And so that house no longer is a home that's in there. I think Airbnb's I think it was like 2015, and I'm going to give or take on this number, it's about 1 million, 1.2 million Airbnbs in the United States. Now there's 2.5 million. That's 1.2 million more units that were being rented, either a house or an apartment, being rented out.
That's gone from this housing mix.
From the market. So all of a sudden, those are just not there. So that's a problem. What you talked about earlier, we have areas in Irvine where we have a massive Chinese population of people that are from mainland China who bought a house here because they think of it almost as a lifeboat. If they need to get out of China, they'd have a place here to stay and have a house here. And so there's areas that a lot of those houses, people don't live there a lot of the time. So it's kind of the same thing as like you built housing units, but they're not being used as normal housing units.
Do you think this is why the rents went up too? Because the rents went up almost by 50%, and there was some level of competition. When people would list the house, they would get a lot of applications.
Right, absolutely. I mean, what'll happen is you'll have more people, you look at different places. You got brand new apartments that are super expensive. You have properties that are 15, 20 years old that aren't as nice as the new stuff is. You got stuff 30 and 40 years old. I don't know about you, but my first apartment wasn't brand new. It was an older place. It was inexpensive. It was cheaper to get into. As you bring more people in, they fill up those bottom tier apartments. They put more people in there. They get more rent. It moves people out to maybe the nicer apartments. But it keeps on pushing it to the point where, I mean, what are rents now? 2-bedroom places in Orange County are the $3,000, $4,000. I mean, that's kind of a crazy rent that people have to pay that didn't have to pay that amount of rent even 5, 6, 7 years ago, the way that the cost of rent's gone up. And then also for renters, think about this. They don't get any deduction. A homeowner at least is making a house payment and getting an interest deduction. A renter's just falling farther and farther behind. Also think about this. When you do your income taxes, you pay a certain rate depending on how much money you make. The more money you make, the higher your rate goes. So in areas that have more people coming into it and they need to live in more expensive housing, jobs have to pay them more money, but nobody changed the brackets on your income taxes. So now a person, 5, 6 years ago was ever paying $2,000 a month rent. They're now paying $4,000. And maybe they got
still paying the same tax, but
or
their
the
income
higher
didn't
tax.
go up.
Let's say their
And the
income
higher-
did
yeah,
go
the-
up.
yeah,
their
the
income
tax
did
is
go
high.
up, but they're at a higher rate on their taxes. So if they made $2,000 more, they don't really end up with $2,000 more. So again, there are some really simple rules about supply and demand, and it affects housing, it affects apartments, it affects everything. You cannot have 8 million people show up and wonder what we're going to do with them or put them someplace. I mean, we saw the stuff that was going on in New York for a while, the different hotels and stuff. Billions of dollars were spent to house people that weren't even supposed to be here. Where does that money come from? And then meanwhile, you've got people in the country that can't afford housing. Now, let's be honest about it. The people understand that if you allow people to come into the country, illegally, legally, or whatever in between gray that you have in there, that Americans over time soften up. We're like, well, they've been there for 10 years. They've paid their taxes. They're good people. We don't want to, do something to let them out, to kick them out. But the problem is it doesn't get us any more housing. They still have to be housed. They still have to be put into schools. They still have to be taken care of at hospitals. And the idea of, well, they pay their taxes, people that are here legally or illegally, will they pay their taxes? That somehow pays for their burden? Yet the amount of income they make and the amount of taxes they pay really doesn't pay for what it costs for their health care, what it costs for their housing that could be subsidized, or what it costs for schooling. So it used to be, remember, when you came to this country, you'd sign a thing saying, I will not go on welfare. You had to sign that, or you had to have your sponsors say they will make sure you don't go on welfare. Yet in California, we went ahead and changed the laws and just said, healthcare is now free for everybody, whether you're here legally, illegally, or again, gray market, and we can argue about what's what. But and how they passed those kind of laws is they'd say, I can't remember what the number was, but I remember reading the first time it was in there, and it says, oh, it'll cost like, $400 per person. I'm like, what do you mean? Or some ridiculous number. I can't remember. It cost me more than that to get a health insurance policy. Clearly, it costs more than that. But how do you get bills passed? You make the number look lower. Once you pass the law, then you come back and you say, oh my gosh, look how much more it costs to pay for health care. This is just amazing. We're just shocked by it. When everybody knew the game was up. The idea is get things passed, put them through the process. So again, it's kind of like with the housing issue or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, it'll only cost so much money. Get the rules changed. Get everything done to say you'll do it, and don't worry about what the issues are after. There's always going to be some other kind of problem. Don't worry about those then. We'll take care of those later.